Boom! The deafening thunder rumbled from the depths of the blue thunder sea, reverberating through the skies and shaking the hearts of all who heard it. On either side of the thunder sea, everyone looked up at the chaotic sea of lightning. In the depths, two figures stood far apart. Amidst the swirling blue thunder, they appeared fragile, as if they could be consumed by the violent storm at any moment. Luoli and Wen Qingxian exchanged a serious glance. Even they could sense the dangerous fluctuations from the thunder sea. They had once been able to withstand it easily for an incense stick's time, but now, if they entered again, it would definitely not be as effortless as before. It seems the Divine Wood Temple is testing this so-called successor, Wen Qingxian said softly. The so-called successor status of Mu Chen and his group hadn't brought them any advantages here. On the contrary, it had caused them considerable trouble. Everyone could see that if it weren't for the so-called successor identity that Mu Chen and Blood Tiandu had obtained, they would have passed this trial easily by now. Luo Li nodded lightly. Since they're successors, they can't be weaklings. It makes sense that the Divine Wood Temple would leave such a trial. After all, they don't want the temple's legacy falling into the hands of useless people. Next, let's see how they break through, Wen Qingxian said slowly. Boom. The thunder still echoed in the air as Mu Chen stood amidst the thunder sea, his face also filled with solemnity. He could feel the violent power of the thunder sea. Beneath the clouds, the blue thunder twisted and churned like a massive dragon, exuding terrifying force. He took a deep breath, his palms clenching tightly. His eyes were sharp, filled with determination. Boom. After a long moment of brewing, the thunder sea finally erupted. Everyone saw the sky light up with blue light as the clouds tore apart, and a gigantic bolt of lightning, about 100 feet long, shot out like a dragon, heading straight for Mu Chen. This blue thunder wasn't like ordinary lightning. Its surface resembled the bark of an ancient tree, covered with deep grooves. It didn't appear to be violent, but only the one locked onto by it could truly feel the terrifying pressure it carried. Black lightning flashed violently around Mu Chen's body. His skin seemed to darken slightly, and a metallic sheen flowed across his skin's surface. Clearly, Mu Chen had pushed his thunder god body to its limits. Boom. The thunderbolt, resembling a massive dragon, finally struck Mu Chen's body. The black and blue lightning crashed against him with such ferocity that even the space around him began to distort under the immense power. Bang! Mu Chen's figure was sent flying, stumbling backward as his feet crashed heavily against the void. He took over 100 steps before he stabilized himself. His upper body clothes had been completely reduced to ashes, and 5 thunder patterns shimmered on his chest. His shoulders were covered in blood. On both sides of the thunder sea, low murmurs of shock spread. Even a peak spiritual tribulation level expert would have been severely injured if they had taken such a hit. Yet, Mu Chen had endured it. His physical body was incredibly powerful. Humph, seeking death. The first Divine Wood Gang thunder left him in such a sorry state. Let's see how he survives the next 9 incense sticks. Wang Zhong sneered, a mocking smile on his lips. The members of the Alliance of Academies, including MOU and Qin Feng, all wore cold smiles. Wu Yingying's gaze remained fixed on the figure in the thunder sea. Her delicate face was still cold, but the hand gripping the crescent moon blade unknowingly tightened. Boom. Another thunderclap rang out, but this time it wasn't from Mu Chen's side. It came from Blood Tiandu. The latter's face grew serious. He formed hand seals, and his blood-red spiritual energy surged around him, like a blood river, to block the incoming thunder. The crimson energy exploded, sending Blood Tiandu stumbling back. A trace of blood appeared in his palm, but he casually wiped it away. His gaze shifted toward Mu Chen, and a cold smile curled at his lips. Compared to Mu Chen, he looked far more at ease. If this continued, the gap between him and Mu Chen would soon become apparent. The first strike of lightning was clearly just a prelude. The thunder sea barely fell silent for a moment before, to everyone's shock, a green glow swept through. Huge bolts of green lightning surged out of the thunder sea, continuously striking toward Mu Chen and Shui Tiandu, covering the sky and the earth. Compared to the previous attacks, these were nothing short of monstrous. Clearly, the thunder sea had finally unleashed its full power. Mu Chen's expression shifted upon seeing the scale of the attack. He stamped his foot heavily, and a torrent of black and white spiritual energy surged outward, forming a powerful barrier that collided directly with the Divine Wood Gang thunder. At this point, he had no choice but to use his spiritual power to block the strikes. Around Shui Tiandu, a sea of blood spread, and his formidable spiritual energy swept outward. The spiritual energy he cultivated had a strong bloody scent, emanating an unusually cold and sharp aura. A blood river circled him, layers upon layers, as he allowed the green lightning to strike him relentlessly. Boom, boom. It was as if the entire Thunder Sea had erupted at this moment. The green lightning streaked across the sky, crashing relentlessly toward the two sources. The shockwaves from the impacts tore through the Thunder Sea below. Countless onlookers felt their hearts race in fear. Even a master at the peak of spiritual tribulation would have no chance of surviving this. Boom, boom, boom. The thunderous sounds continued. In the blink of an eye, for incense sticks worth of time had passed. As time went on, everyone could feel the attacks of the divine Wood Gang thunder growing more violent. Luoli and Wenqinxian also couldn't help but grip their hands tightly. Boom. Another massive bolt of lightning, resembling a dragon, tore through the black and white spiritual barrier, crashing into Mu Chen's body. A muffled grunt escaped his throat as his figure staggered backward, his body scorched black. Boom. On the other side, Xue Tiandu was also forced back. His sleeve had been shredded, and blood trickled down his shoulder. The fluctuations of his spiritual energy grew erratic. At this point, 7 incense sticks of time had passed. But everyone knew that the next 3 incense sticks would be the most grueling. The Thunder Sea continued to churn, and the green light emanating from it had become blindingly intense. However, in the face of this, Xue Tiandu laughed. His gaze playfully turned toward Mu Chen in the distance, and with a smile, he said, "If you withdraw now, you might still save your life." Mu Chen glanced at him indifferently but said nothing. The people outside the Thunder Sea looked at Xue Tiandu in surprise. Wasn't he worried? Boom. Just as they wondered, the Thunder Sea finally erupted in full. Layers of the sea seemed to split open, with blinding green light shooting up like pillars of light, before plunging back down, spreading across the sky. The green light turned into a thunderous roar, like a divine wood descending from the heavens, intending to pierce through the earth. Haha. Xue Tiandu, watching the terrifying assault, laughed aloud. He then clenched his fist, and a flash of green light appeared in his hand. To everyone's shock, an ancient greenwood bell appeared in his grasp. Though unremarkable, everyone could sense a unique power emanating from it. This wood spirit bell I obtained from the Wood God Temple is perfect for countering the divine Wood Gang thunder here. I didn't intend to use it, but given the situation, I'll refrain from acting rashly. Xue Tiandu smiled at Mu Chen, then flicked his finger. The wood spirit bell immediately expanded, growing to a size of 100 feet and hovering above Xue Tiandu's head. Boom. Boom. The divine Wood Gang thunder howled down, crashing into the greenwood bell. A tremendous roar filled the air, but no matter how the divine lightning struck, it could not break through the bell. Outside the Thunder Sea, countless people watched enviously. No wonder Xue Tiandu was completely unafraid. It turned out he had such a precious treasure. Xue Tiandu has a spiritual treasure to protect him. What will Mu Chen do now? Some looked at Mu Chen, and from the current situation, it seemed like Xue Tiandu would easily endure the last 3 incense sticks. In the gaze of countless onlookers, Mu Chen's handsome face remained calm and composed. He lifted his head to look at the descending divine thunder, then took a deep breath. A bright light flickered in his black eyes, making the young man appear especially rebellious and unruly. "You think you can strike me down, Mu Chen? It's not that easy." Mu Chen flicked his sleeve, and the immense spiritual energy surrounding him suddenly dissipated. This action stunned those watching from the Thunder Sea. The guy was daring enough to withdraw his spiritual power at a time like this? Ignoring their astonished gazes, Mu Chen not only withdrew his spiritual power, but also sat down cross-legged in midair. His hands formed seals, and black lightning flashed wildly across his body. Beneath his skin, veins writhed like coiling dragons, releasing incredible power. He was about to rely solely on his physical body to withstand the violent Wood God Gang thunder. This guy. Is he looking for death? Countless people stared, dumbfounded. Boom. A deafening roar of thunder echoed through the heavens and earth. In the Thunder Sea, the thunder clouds surged violently, and in midair, bolts of blue lightning, resembling giant dragons, descended. The terrifying might seemed capable of destroying the very heavens and earth. Amid the stunned stares, Mu Chen calmly remained sitting in the Thunder Sea. All his spiritual power had been retracted into his body. His handsome face appeared even more serene, as he slightly tilted his head, his black eyes reflecting the blue lightning. Deep in his eyes, there was a hint of rebellious madness. Since even the 5-rune thunder body can't stop you, then let's get even stronger. Mu Chen's palms suddenly clenched tightly, and his face hardened. The Wood God Gang thunder was indeed formidable, but for Mu Chen, it also presented an opportunity. The cultivation of the thunder god body relied on the power of thunder. Regardless of the type of thunder, it all traced back to the same origin. Using this power to cultivate the thunder god body would yield remarkable results. However, it came with significant risks, as this force was uncontrollable. If it went out of control, the consequences could be disastrous. But Chen had never followed a smooth path in his cultivation journey. The road of the strong was never easy. Without immense perseverance, one would never reach greatness. Therefore, such risks were not enough to make Chen hesitate. His eyes slowly closed, his hands forming the seal for the thunder god body's cultivation method. Inside his body, his spiritual power quietly surged, ready to face any danger. Boom. In a thunderous crash, a bolt of blue lightning, faster than a shooting star, struck down, mercilessly slamming into Chen's body. Chen's body shook violently as if struck by a heavy blow. His skin split open, and blood poured out, staining almost half of his body. Yet even then, Chen kept his eyes tightly shut. Only the faint tremors of his body revealed the turmoil within. Sizzle, sizzle. Black and blue lightning flickered across Chen's body, as two forces of thunder clashed in an intense battle, neither side yielding. Boom, boom. The sound of thunder reverberated incessantly. Waves of blue thunderbolts, like giant dragons, continuously struck Chen. The lightning flickered wildly, and the blue light almost engulfed his entire body. The thunder clouds beneath him were scattered by the impact, and within 100 meters of him, the space itself began to twist under the force of the violent shockwaves. This scene sent chills down the spines of many onlookers. Luo Li and Wen Qingxuan's faces became much more serious. The thunderous power was so intense that they could no longer sense Chen's spiritual fluctuations, leaving them unable to determine whether he was in a good or bad state. This guy is just too reckless. Wen Qingxian couldn't help but mutter. Although Chen's power seemed to be limited to the physical tribulation, she understood that he had many hidden techniques. If he truly intended to unleash all his power, these God-gang thunders would never have forced him into such a dire situation. But who would have known? Luo Li's clear eyes fixed on the area where the cyan thunderlight spread, yet she did not speak. In this moment, she still trusted Chen, because he was not the reckless type. Since he had chosen this path, it was clear that he had his reasons and confidence. Blood Tian Du seems to have no issues, thanks to the divine wood spirit bell, Wen Qingxian remarked, looking in another direction. There, Blood Tian Du hovered in midair, a massive cyan bell suspended above his head, emitting a faint cyan glow. The divine wood gang thunder that fell from the sky was completely absorbed by the bell. This bell was clearly a supreme-grade spiritual artifact, and it had a suppressive effect on the divine wood gang thunder here. So, Blood Tian Du should have no problem holding on. At this moment, the contrast between the two was striking. One was relaxed and at ease, while the other was a bloody mess. It's not over yet. No one can predict the outcome, Luo Li whispered. Wen Qingxian could only nod in agreement. Similar conversations were taking place not just between the two of them, but throughout the entire area. After all, the stark contrast between Chen's misery and Blood Tian Du's ease was undeniable. Time passed slowly amidst the hushed whispers. The incense had almost burned out. Boom. The violent thunderclaps still echoed through the heavens and earth. Blood Tian Du stood proudly in midair, one hand behind his back. Scarlet spiritual energy surged from his body, eventually flowing into the wooden bell above him. The divine wood gang thunder struck the bell with a loud crash, but it couldn't harm his body. It only drained some of his spiritual energy. However, this spiritual energy consumption was nothing compared to what Chen was enduring. Blood Tian Du looked indifferently at the distant cyan thunderlight. Faintly, he could see that the figure seemed to be trembling as if enduring great pain. This made a mocking smile appear at the corner of his mouth. This guy truly didn't know his limits. Did he really think his physical strength could allow him to resist the divine wood gang thunder? Was this the fool Luo Li liked? Blood Tian Du shook his head with pity, though the cold smile at his lips only grew more pronounced. As time ticked by, everyone could sense that the once violent thunder sea was gradually calming. Clearly, this was the sign that the divine wood gang thunder was coming to an end. Boom. The final massive cyan thunderclap roared down, and the thunderous sound that had filled the heavens and earth finally dissipated. The entire world seemed to quiet down significantly. Blood Tian-du remained suspended in the air, extending his hand. The wooden bell above him glowed with a cyan light, rapidly shrinking before falling back into his palm. He glanced at it, noting that the bell's surface appeared somewhat dimmed, clearly showing some signs of wear. "It seems it's over," Blood Tian-du said with a faint smile. He looked at the distant cyan thunderlight, which no longer emitted any spiritual energy fluctuations. Not only him, but everyone's gaze in the surrounding area was fixed on that fading cyan light, eager to know what the figure inside it looked like now. Under their watchful eyes, the cyan thunderlight slowly dissipated, and as the light faded, a seated figure gradually came into view, eventually becoming fully clear. Hiss! As the figure became clearer, everyone inhaled sharply. When Qin Xian and Luo Li's faces changed slightly. The figure was quietly sitting cross-legged, his body a dark red color. His body was covered in a thick layer of blood cocoon, which had encased every inch of him. The dark crimson hue of the blood cocoon sent a chill down their spines. They could only imagine how much pain Mu Chen must have endured for the blood cocoon to accumulate layer after layer of blood, turning this dark and ominous shade. "Could he be dead?" someone whispered, as they felt no fluctuations from the blood cocoon, not even a breath. "He deserves it." The people from Sacred Spirit Academy and the Alliance of Academies exclaimed with delight, though their faces twisted with gritted teeth. Shui Tiandu also kept his gaze fixed on the figure bound by the blood shackles, a faint, indifferent smile crossing his face. He then shook his head and no longer paid any attention, stepping decisively toward the side of the Thunder Sea. His steady steps carried an air of a victor. He had initially wanted to give Mu Chen a real opportunity to fight, but he never expected the latter to lack such fortune. "If you can't even pass this test, then it saves me from stepping in," Shui Tiandu said indifferently. He took another step forward. Crack. At the very moment his foot moved, a faint sound of something cracking seemed to echo through the stillness of the air. Shui Tiandu suddenly froze in his tracks. Slowly, he turned his head and fixed his gaze on the unmoving figure bound by the blood shackles. His pupils contracted sharply as he saw fine cracks appear on the blood shackles, which quickly spread. Crack, crack. The cracking sounds grew more frequent. Even those standing on either side of the Thunder Sea could hear them. Their expressions changed, staring at the figure in the blood shackles as pieces of it began to fall off. The layers of blood shackles fell away, revealing pale skin beneath. The skin emitted a faint glow, and underneath it, a faint greenish hue could be seen. The layers of blood shackles quickly peeled off until they were completely gone. With the blood shackles fully removed, Mu Chen's figure reappeared in their vision. He was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, but anyone could sense that his body was now radiating light. There was even a subtle sound of thunder rolling, emanating from within him. Shui Tiandu stared at him fiercely. Mu Chen's eyes trembled slightly at that moment. Finally, he slowly opened his eyes, revealing his gaze amidst the stunned looks of those around him. Boom. When his eyes opened, it was as if thunder had once again shaken the heavens. His black eyes flickered with intertwined blue and black lightning, making him appear somewhat mysterious. Many people gasped, and the mocking smiles of those from the Sacred Spirit Academy and the Alliance of Academies began to freeze on their faces. Mu Chen was still alive. He had actually withstood the terrifying attack from the Divine Wood Gang Thunder with nothing but his physical body. Shui Tiandu's expression darkened drastically at that moment. On the other hand, Luo Li and Wen Qinxin couldn't help but reveal bright smiles. The mountaintop grew deathly quiet as everyone stared in awe at the slender figure that emerged after the blood shackles fell away. In their eyes, there was an overwhelming disbelief. No one had expected Mu Chen to survive the horrifying strike of the Divine Wood Gang Thunder with just his physical strength. This is too terrifying. Many people exchanged glances and muttered in disbelief. How strong must his physical body be to achieve something like this? Amidst the murmurs, Shui Tiandu's expression turned even darker. His eyes fixed on Mu Chen, his gaze cold and ominous. Although both of them had passed through the Thunder Sea, the difference between them had already been decided in many people's minds. After all, Shui Tiandu had relied on spiritual items, while Mu Chen had done it entirely through his own strength. Though others wouldn't voice it, deep down they knew that Mu Chen's performance in the Thunder Sea had far surpassed that of Xue Tiandu. This fact was something Xue Tiandu couldn't tolerate. Coming from the Blood God clan, and being part of the royal family, his status and position were incomparable to Mu Chen's. Yet now, Mu Chen had stolen the spotlight. A bloodthirsty gleam flickered in Xue Tiandu's eyes as he glared at Mu Chen. Impressive. I didn't expect you to have such a hidden card. Too much praise, Mu Chen replied with a faint smile. Xue Tiandu shrugged and smiled. But this is what makes things interesting. If you really fell here, I'd be terribly disappointed. Luo Li's judgment shouldn't be that bad. Trust me, you'll find it even more interesting, Mu Chen said seriously, locking eyes with Xue Tiandu. Oh? Then I'll be watching with great interest, Xue Tiandu sneered, his lips curling into a mocking grin. You'll have your chance, Mu Chen smiled, growing disinterested in further conversation. He tapped the ground with his toes, and his figure shot out of the Thunder Sea, landing beside Luo Li and Wenqin Xian. Mu Chen smiled and nodded. His palms slowly clenched, and a subtle curve appeared at the corners of his mouth. He could feel it, his physical body had become stronger once again. His earlier adventures had been the right path, even though they were painful. But it was precisely because of the cost he had paid that this strength felt so real. Mu Chen scanned the area, and many people who met his gaze quickly averted their eyes, a hint of awe in their expressions. Although his surface strength still seemed to be in the physical body tribulation stage, they all understood that even experts in the spiritual energy tribulation stage probably wouldn't be able to defeat him. His physical body was simply too powerful. They had no idea how he had cultivated it. Wang Zhong and Mou exchanged a glance with Mu Chen, their eyes darkening. However, Mu Chen paid them no mind. Wu Yingying briefly met Mu Chen's gaze before quickly turning her head coldly. Her jade hand, which had been tightly gripping the crescent moon blade's hilt, subtly loosened at that moment. But when she realized her own slight change in emotion, she froze for a moment. Then, she became a little angry. Why should she care about the life or death of this lecherous fool? Mu Chen's gaze swept past the crowd and landed on the deep green hall ahead. They had reached the stone steps, which were like layers of blue stones, extending all the way to the grand hall. This was the Wood God Academy. After all their time and effort, they had finally arrived here. As Mu Chen focused on the ancient and weathered deep green hall, the other survivors who had crossed the Thunder Sea also cast their scorching gazes in that direction. When they first entered the Wood God Temple, there had been thousands of teams, but now, only 100 remained. The elimination rate was terrifying. Let's go. Mu Chen's figure shot forward first. He lightly tapped the stone steps with the tip of his foot, and like an arrow, he shot toward the hall. Luo Li and Wenqin Xian almost immediately followed. At the same time, Xue Tiandu, Wang Zhong, Mou, and others transformed into shadows of light, rushing forward. The Wood God Academy was right in front of them. One more step, and they would reach the most crucial part of the Wood God Temple. Swish. The sharp sound of wind tearing through the air echoed as nearly 100 people pushed themselves to the limit. The 1,000-plus stone steps were a blur under their speed, and soon, Mu Chen reached the mountaintop. His vision expanded, and the ancient hall was now clearly before him. The hall was towering and magnificent. Standing before it, Mu Chen and the others looked like ants. The hall lacked any walls, revealing a vast azure wood plaza. In the center of the plaza, 10 massive azure pillars shot into the sky. These pillars were about 1,000 feet tall, appearing as if they were piercing the clouds. The azure pillars were covered in mysterious glowing patterns, with faint light radiating from them, giving off an unshakable aura. However, Mu Chen's gaze barely lingered on the 10 pillars before shifting toward the top. There, 10 azure light orbs floated. Within each orb, surging spiritual energy could be felt, even causing the spiritual energy in the air to begin to boil. Everyone's eyes were fixated on those orbs, their gazes burning with intensity. In each orb, they could vaguely make out a piece of equipment. Some were swords, some scrolls, and others were pieces of armor. What they all had in common was the overwhelming spiritual energy emanating from them. Clearly, they were no ordinary items. The gazes focused on the 10 orbs, each pair of eyes filled with fiery anticipation. While no one could yet identify exactly what these items were, even a fool could tell they were precious treasures. There might be quasi-divine artifacts inside those orbs. Luo Li leaned toward Mu Chen and whispered lightly. Mu Chen nodded imperceptibly. His gaze swept over several orbs before speaking in a voice that only the three of them could hear. Luo Li, you take the third on the left. Captain 1, you take the fifth on the right. Luo Li and Wenqin Xian were both momentarily startled, but quickly nodded without showing any emotion. It seemed Mu Chen already knew something. Move. Mu Chen's eyes flashed. With a sudden shout, a dragon-shaped shadow appeared beneath his feet, and he dashed forward in an explosive rush. Luoli and Wen Qinxian shot out in an instant, heading straight for the light sphere that Mu Chen had mentioned earlier. As they moved, Mu Chen also pushed his speed to the limit. The light sphere he chose was the 9th one on the right, because from the identity of the so-called successor, he already knew what treasures were inside these 10 light spheres. The 3 they selected were the most powerful among them. These were 3 quasi-divine artifacts. Quasi-divine artifacts, though the lowest rank of divine artifacts, were far beyond the scope of spiritual tools. Each quasi-divine artifact held enough power to dramatically increase one's strength. The power of these artifacts was not something a spiritual tool could compare to. As for Mu Chen, aside from the great Xun'er demon pillar, he didn't have any other noteworthy treasures. The dragon-devouring demonic spear, though considered a supreme spiritual tool, was still far inferior to a quasi-divine artifact. Just as the 3 of them moved, they immediately triggered a response from those watching them. The others, unable to determine which of the 10 light spheres was the best, rushed him blindly, hoping for luck. Mu Chen, without any hesitation, activated his dragon shadow beneath his feet, moving like a soaring dragon. In an instant, he appeared before the 9th sky-reaching pillar on the right. Then, with a burst of speed, he shot upwards and landed at the top of the pillar. The light before him filled his vision. As he focused, he saw something hidden within the brilliance. It was a stone seal carved from an unknown material, dark green in color and extremely ancient in appearance. There were no intricate patterns, only a dark stone turtle carved at the top. The turtle's surface showed signs of age, as though it had been worn down by the passage of time. Mu Chen's gaze fixed on the stone turtle seal, and he felt the spiritual energy within his body grow heavy. He immediately became alert. This was truly a powerful item. Just a single glance made him feel as if he was carrying immense weight, and even his spiritual energy was affected. As expected, it's a quasi-divine artifact. Mu Chen silently praised. From the information he had gathered about the successor, he knew that there was a divine object called the Mystic Tortoise Seal within the Wood God Temple, capable of suppressing all in its vicinity. It seemed that this was the very artifact. Since he had found this divine item, Mu Chen naturally wouldn't let it slip away. He immediately activated his spiritual energy, and black thunder flashed across his body. With a lightning-fast motion, his hand shot through the light sphere, grabbing for the Mystic Tortoise Seal. Whoosh! However, just as Mu Chen reached for the Mystic Tortoise Seal, a sharp sound of wind tearing through the air came from above. A blood-red spear, reeking of blood, shot down with extreme ferocity, aimed directly at his head. The attack was vicious. If Mu Chen reached out to grab the seal, the spear would undoubtedly pierce his skull. Mu Chen's eyes passed over the spear, and then he saw the figure behind it, Blood Tiandu, expressionless but with a cruel glint in his eyes. At that moment, Mu Chen's gaze grew cold. This guy was relentless, always keeping his eyes on him. Tianfu's 3rd anniversary. In the blink of an eye, our fan group, Tianfu, has been established for 3 years. In these 3 years, Tianfu has grown stronger and more glorious. Tonight at 8 p.m., we will have an event to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of Tianfu on the official Great Ruler YY channel 1744. Don't miss out. Join us at 8 p.m. on the Great Ruler YY channel 1744. There will be many beautiful ladies singing, so make sure not to miss it. Whoosh! The blood spear whistled through the air, carrying an unmatched force as it stabbed at Mu Chen's head with lethal intent. Mu Chen's eyes turned frosty at the same time. Black lightning erupted from his body in an instant. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and thunder flared around the fist before he swung it violently towards the incoming blood spear. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out, sparks flying. When fist met spear, a shockwave of force rippled outward, sending both Mu Chen and Blood Tiandu stumbling backward. Mu Chen's feet lightly touched the air, steadying himself. He looked expressionlessly at Blood Tiandu, his eyes cold with a hint of murderous intent. Blood Tiandu also acquired the status of an heir, which means he is evidently aware of some information. The Mystic Tortoise Seal is among the 10 treasures and is considered the most formidable. Therefore, his choice closely mirrors that of Mu Chen. Mu Chen looked at him indifferently, clenched his fist, and the dragon-devouring demonic spear materialized, emanating an overwhelming aura of menace as its sharp point directed toward Blood Tiandu. He smiled and said, "I've never liked you. And it seems there's no need to hold back anymore. Are you sure you're not just asking for humiliation?" Blood Tian-du retorted with a smirk. Perhaps you don't have the qualification for that, Mu Chen replied seriously. Blood Tian-du's lips twitched slightly, his gaze turning colder. The veins on his hand gripping the blood spear bulged. Gradually, his smile morphed into a sinister grin as he stamped his foot, causing his figure to vanish in an almost unnatural manner. In the moment Blood Tian-du disappeared, a dragon-like shadow flickered beneath Mu Chen's feet as he swiftly reappeared next to the pillar. He swung the dragon-devouring demonic spear in a deadly arc, launching a rapid thrust aimed at the left side of the pillar. Clang! The blood spear shot out from that position, colliding with the dragon-devouring demonic spear. Sparks flew, and the force created a shockwave that shattered the air around them. To snag the treasure or to defeat me? Which is it? Mu Chen smiled faintly at the figure standing on the left. It seems there's no other choice. Blood Tian-du responded with a cold laugh as he stamped his foot down heavily. Waves of crimson spiritual energy surged from his body like a tide, quickly filling half the sky. The immense pressure of his spiritual energy surrounded Mu Chen. Boom! At that moment, black thunderous light crackled around Mu Chen's body. 5 thunder runes manifested on his chest, indicating he had activated the Thunder God body. The overwhelming power coursing through him rendered Blood Tian-du's oppressive spiritual energy ineffective. Swish! Both figures darted forward almost simultaneously, followed by the thunderous sound of rushing wind. An overwhelming onslaught of spear and spear shadows clashed with immense spiritual energy, like a rainstorm colliding violently. Clang! Clang! All anyone could hear was the frenetic sound of metal clashing and the tumultuous waves of energy unleashed, while the two figures became increasingly blurred. That area was a no-go zone. Even the other treasure hunters had to steer clear. Clang! The tips of their weapons collided perfectly, like two needles touching. Under the force exerted by the two, the long spear and polearm began to bend slightly, only to snap back straight a moment later as the air exploded, causing both figures to be pushed back a few steps. Blood Tian-du's expression turned cold. Indeed, Mu Chen's physical body was formidable. Although he surpassed Mu Chen in terms of spiritual power, the latter compensated for that gap with sheer physical strength. It seemed conventional means would not be enough to deal with this foe. Blood God Palm. With that thought, Blood Tian-du's fist suddenly opened. Boundless blood light formed in his palm before he slammed it down, and a massive blood palm, about 100 feet wide, overshadowed Mu Chen like a dark cloud, the intense metallic scent spreading through the air. Mu Chen's gaze flickered. He clenched his 5 fingers tightly, black lightning dancing wildly. His arms suddenly took on a pitch-black hue, exuding an indestructible aura. Thunder Deity Fist. He threw a punch, which boomed like thunder as the lightning erupted, colliding forcefully with the blood palm. Bang! A violent surge of spiritual energy erupted, distorting the surrounding space. Onlookers who saw the scale of the confrontation couldn't help but change their expressions. Such a clash would likely be extremely chaotic, even for masters at the peak spiritual tribulation level. 4 gods sealing heaven seal. With the blood palm obliterated, Mu Chen showed no sign of retreat. Changing his technique, a tide of spiritual energy erupted behind him, forming a starry sky with 4 beast shadows manifesting, rushing towards Blood Tian-du in an instant. Trivial techniques. Blood Tian-du scoffed as he spread his hands. Vast spiritual energy appeared to form a crimson curtain descending from the sky. Mu Chen saw this and smiled faintly. His figure suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already standing in front of the mystic tortoise seal. Stay put until you've defeated me. Blood Tian-du's eyes turned cold, and with a snap of his palm, the blood-red hand shot toward Mu Chen, aiming straight at his head. Mu Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. The dragon-devouring demonic spear suddenly erupted in a powerful thrust, hitting beneath the mystic tortoise seal. Then, with a shake of the spear, he sent the seal flying. Whoosh! The mystic tortoise seal soared into the air. Blood Tian-du's gaze flickered, and his figure transformed into a blood shadow, swiftly appearing ahead of Mu Chen, reaching the mystic tortoise seal first. He grabbed it in one motion, a cold smile forming on his face as he said, "Thanks, seems this treasure is not meant for you." As his words fell, his palm clutched the mystic tortoise seal, a smug grin curling at the corner of his mouth. However, his smile lasted only for a moment before his expression changed dramatically. He felt the mystic tortoise seal in his hands suddenly become unbearably heavy, as if he were holding up a mountain. His body grew sluggish, and even the spiritual energy within him seemed to slow down. "No need to thank me." A hint of mockery echoed from ahead. Suddenly, Chen appeared before him like a ghost, and his hand, crackling with lightning, moved like lightning itself to strike at Blood Tiandu's chest. A violent gust of wind exploded with the strike, causing Blood Tiandu's expression to shift slightly. He flicked his sleeve, and a wooden bell shot out, expanding rapidly in front of him. Boom! Chen's palm strike landed heavily on the wooden bell, sending a deep, resonant chime echoing through the air. The sound waves spread like solid matter, shaking the air in the region, causing constant explosions. The wooden bell absorbed the force of the strike and quickly retreated back into Blood Tiandu's sleeve. Such a pity. Chen sighed inwardly. Before the mystic tortoise seal was refined, touching it with bare hands would only result in being crushed by its overwhelming weight. That was why he had made it fly, intending for Blood Tiandu to take it and fall into his trap. Blood Tiandu had done just as Chen expected, unknowingly putting himself in a precarious position. If not for the wood spirit bell protecting him, Chen would have had a chance to injure Blood Tiandu. Really good calculation. Blood Tiandu's face turned grim. He had realized what had happened and quickly reacted. With a flick of his hand, the mystic tortoise seal soared into the sky. As soon as it left his grasp, the weight vanished. His eyes burned with fury as he glared at Chen, seething with rage. This guy had set him up. "Since you're seeking death, let me show you how powerful the divine soul tribulation can be." Blood Tiandu clenched his palms, and a vast blood sea surged behind him. His eyes turned crimson, and a bloodthirsty aura filled his face. Blood God Palm, Blood Dragon Suppression. With a sudden jab of his blood-red finger, the blood sea roared, forming into a ferocious blood dragon. The dragon tore through the sky, exuding a thick, pungent smell of blood as it cast a vast shadow, covering hundreds of feet around Chen, blocking all his escape routes. Clearly, Blood Tiandu had pushed the power of the first divine soul tribulation to its peak. Its strength was even greater than the war puppet Chen had encountered at Spirit Treasure Mountain. The blood dragon descended, and Chen's handsome face grew serious. However, he showed no intention of retreating. Instead, he took a deep breath, and the lightning on his body surged to its maximum. The originally dark lightning now mixed with a faint trace of blue. On his arm, lightning runes seemed to grow from his body. The runes, dark as night, covered every inch of his right arm. Black lightning, like a viscous liquid, flowed slowly across his arm, emanating a terrifying power that even caused the space around him to warp. Thunder God Arm. Chen took a step forward, and in his black eyes, it was as if thunder itself was manifesting. His arm, dripping with the black lightning liquid, now carried the power of 1,000 bolts as he threw a punch straight at the descending blood dragon. Boom. The moment they collided, the world seemed to pause for a second. Then, the space around them cracked as a terrifying shockwave swept outward, knocking everyone nearby off their feet. The shockwave raged, and the blood dragon was instantly shattered, scattering into countless blood-red specks of light across the sky. Blood Tiandu's gaze shifted forward, his face turning ashen. There, Chen stood unmoving, maintaining the posture of a punch just delivered, with thunderous liquid flowing along his arm. On his chest, lightning flickered, and above the 5th thunder rune, another rune quietly appeared. Chen's thunder god body had broken through once again, reaching the level of the 6th thunder rune body. With lightning flashing, Chen's long spear swept wide, its tip angled sharply.